In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can multiply or divide fractions. In a previous video that I'll link here, we looked at the basics of how we could multiply any two fractions or divide any two fractions. But in the example on the left-hand side, I've got a combination of both. I've been given three fractions where the first two need to be multiplied, and the product then needs to be divided by 3/4. So answering the first bit, that whenever I multiply two fractions, I multiply their numerators and I multiply their denominators in order to give me my final answer. So I'll have 1 times by 7 over 3 times by 8. And this will then be divided by 3/4. 1 times 7 is 7, and 3 times by 8 is 24. And this is going to be divided by 3/4. Whenever I divide by a fraction, I multiply by its reciprocal instead. And by timesing by the reciprocal, it now means I can use the same technique for multiplying. That's 7 times by 4 and 24 times by 3. And this will give me 28 over 72. Always remember to simplify the fraction. So it will be 14 over 36, which will simplify down to 7 over 18. Now we could have answered this question slightly differently at this point. That 7 times by 4 all over 24 times by 3 is what I would have done at this point. But we can actually cancel out common factors. 24 is divisible by 4. So I can divide it by 4 and get 6, which means that if I've divided the bottom by 4, I've got to divide the top by 4 as well. Here you'll see that I'm left with 7 as my numerator, and 6 times 3, which is 18, as my denominator. And I get to the answer a lot quicker through simplifying first. Pause the video here and have a go at the question on the right hand side. When you're ready for the answer, press play. So the first thing I need to do is multiply the first two fractions together, 1 times by 2 and 2 times by 5. I'll then divide this by 4 over 7. Notice how we've got a common factor of 2 in both my numerator and denominator of the first part. So 1 times by 2 is 2, and 2 times by 5 is 10, and dividing it by 4 over 7. Now as I said before, we had that common factor of 2, which would have meant that we could have crossed out the 2 and the 2 from both my numerator and denominator and be left with 1 over 5. 2/10 can be simplified to 1 over 5, and therefore my problem is now a fifth divided by 4/7. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So now my problem is 1 times by 7 and 5 times by 4. This would then give me as a final answer of 7 over 20 because it can't be simplified anymore.